and thank them for the care they have shown the earth over thousands of years. This feels a bit like preaching to the choir, as the old saying goes, because I'm sure that most of you know what this is about and why it's so important. Why it's so important that Australia does its bit in helping the world to stay under 1.5 degrees of heating. How hard that's going to be when we have no leadership from the federal government, which won't commit to a target of zero emissions by 2050 and is unlikely to reach the pathetic goal it has set for 2030. Why it's so important that as we begin to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 recession, that recovery funding is spent on sustainable projects rather than the furphy of a gas-led recovery. Why it's so important to respect the rights of First Peoples and protect their sacred sites from destruction by companies such as Rio Tinto, BHP and Whitehaven Coal. Why it's so important to stop the destruction of forests and the habitat of various animals, including, of course, we've been hearing a lot lately about koala habitat. Why it's so important to plan for the transition of fossil fuel industry workers to other jobs as companies transition to sustainable energy sources. Why it's so important, ... the list goes on and on. Many other people know why this is important too, and many of them are people of faith. People of faith like the members of ARC, the Australian Religious Response to Climate Change, and similar organisations around the world. And they realise that if they came together under one banner and spoke with one voice, they could be very influential in the political and business worlds. And so Green Faith International was born. Green Faith's mission statement says, building a worldwide multi-faith climate and environmental movement. And their vision is this: we envision a world transformed in which humanity in all its diversity has developed a shared reverence for life on earth. Religious and spiritual communities everywhere generate a moral awakening to the sacredness of earth and the dignity of all people. Together we are building resilient, caring communities and economies that meet everyone's needs and protect the planet. The era of conquest, extraction and exploitation has given way to cooperation and community. The good life is one of connectedness with each other and all of nature. It is a world of flourishing life that replaces despair with joy, scarcity with shared abundance, and privilege with justly distributed power. Greenfaith's values are spirituality, compassion, justice, inclusiveness, responsible practice, and what they call bold for good. In other words, courage in taking risks and being creative in actions. Green Faith drew up a statement and asked faith leaders around the world to put their signatures to it. So far, more than 100 have done so, and thousands of others like you and me have been able to sign up to it via the internet. Today's events around the world are bringing attention to that global multi-faith statement from senior faith leaders to politicians, telling them that they must take serious action on the climate now. Today's events around the world are drawing the attention of the world's media to this major new multi-faith statement from some of the world's best-known faith leaders to our political and business leaders, telling them that decisions they make now must not perpetuate an outdated economic system that relies on fossil fuels and the destruction of the very forests, waters, oceans and soils that make life possible. The order says that I'm going to read the statement, but I'm not going to read the whole statement because it's 4 pages long. And you've got a summary of it in your handout. And if there aren't enough handouts, we can print those before you go. I'll just read the preamble and then proceed the actual position statement. We are united by a fundamental belief that all people, all living things and the earth are sacred. As we consider the state of the world today, our hearts overflow with concern. We are frightened and frustrated by the damage that COVID-19 is inflicting on our communities. The pandemic has revealed cruel injustices. The vulnerable suffer the most severe impacts. We know about this injustice. We have seen it before. These same communities are disproportionately and catastrophically affected by the accelerating climate emergency. Grave threats are at our door as the world shelters in place. We see the rise of increasingly unaccountable or authoritarian governments, exploitive economies, and extremist cultural forces which pit us against each other, target women and oppressed communities, and foster doubt about the science required to save life on Earth. This is a world of widespread poverty, racial and gender injustice, massive income inequality, and the devastation of nature. This version of civilization is unsustainable at every level. Worse impacts lie ahead if we do not act now. A far better future is possible if our collective response to the pandemic and the climate crisis is guided by compassion, love and justice at a scale that meets this moment. We must not only provide the relief that so many need to survive, we must create a new culture, politics and economy of life that heals people and planet. We envision a world transformed in which humanity in all its diversity has developed a shared reverence for life on Earth. Together we are building resilient, caring communities and economies that meet everyone's needs and protect the planet. The era of conquest, extraction and exploitation has given way to cooperation and community. The good life is one of connectedness with each other and all of nature. It is a world of flourishing life that replaces despair with joy, scarcity with shared abundance, and privilege with justly distributed power. The work to create this future begins now. In the months ahead, governments and financial institutions will spend massive sums in response to the pandemic. Governments will present climate commitments at COP26 in November 2021. These actions must not perpetuate an outdated economic system that relies on fossil fuels and the destruction of the very forests, waters, oceans and soils that make life possible. Instead, they should accelerate renewable energy development, ensure universal access to clean water and air, affordable clean energy and food grown with respect for the land, create jobs paying family-sustaining wages to workers in safe conditions. Wealthy countries must take responsibility for a larger share of emissions reductions to support a global just transition. We must also prepare ourselves to welcome those who will be displaced by COVID and climate change. Compassion, love and justice require no less of us all. And obviously a lot of those words are familiar because they've become part of the mission statement and the mission statement and the vision statement. So the position statement starts off as signatories to Sacred People, Sacred Earth, and based on our moral and religious beliefs, we affirm the following, and there are 4 headings. The first heading is finance. Money and finance must serve morality and the common good, not exploit the vulnerable, destroy nature, and increase income inequality. And there are 5 dot points under that heading. The next section is governments. Governments must enact and enforce laws that protect people and planet alike, in keeping with the inherent dignity of every human being and the world's biodiversity. And there are 6 dot points under that heading. The next section is religious and spiritual institutions. We must be models of environmental leadership, utilising our rituals, religious education, facilities, and the public voices of our spiritual leaders, members and followers. And there are 5 specific actions under that heading. And then finally, individuals. Each person carries a divine spark, unique gifts, and a moral responsibility to make one's life a blessing for the earth and all people. And there are 4 actions under that particular heading, none of which will come as a surprise to anybody. And I guess a lot of people are already doing some or most of the things that are mentioned there. So it's a comprehensive statement, and if all of those things were to come to fruition, what a difference it would make.